All right. Did it ask you to record it?
Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, first of all, Sarah, for joining us here today. And we just met through online. And of course, you Googled me, you said, to make sure I wasn't spam and all of that. And that's good. So I do exist. And just a little bit about who we are. I just told you earlier, but we are from Colorado Christian University. We're in the master's program of clinical counseling in psychology. And we're all working towards our masters. And we're in a course right now about what it means to be an LPC, counseling, and all of those type of things. So we have a few questions, actually not a few, several, and that we'd like to ask. But before we do that, would you just kind of tell us who you are and just a little bit about your practice there?
For sure. I'll give you the intro that I give every new client. Okay. So I'm originally from Louisiana. I got my bachelor's from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette in psychology. I always felt like a black sheep when it came from being from the South. Just certain perspectives I never really agreed with. So I always knew I wanted to leave Louisiana and move away. And fortunately, grad school was kind of my opportunity to do that. Little did I know I would end up in Hays, Kansas. Not exactly the most exotic of places, but I went to Fort Hays State, and that's where I got my master's in clinical psychology. It was during my master's there. It was my first semester that I actually ended up meeting my husband, who's from here in Colorado. So we did the long distance thing for a while. And then when I graduated, he and I actually decided to randomly move up to Western Massachusetts just to do it. We're young and, why not? And so I worked in a community mental health setting up there for 2 years. So I got my 2,000 hours for licensure while we were up there. Very hard work, very challenging work. Community mental health kind of has that reputation, just for being very challenging, especially challenging up there because there's a significant opioid epidemic.
Yeah.
I think it's everywhere now at this point, but at that time I learned a lot about that. So that was very challenging, but also good. It helped me grow as a counselor. We ultimately decided to move back in November 2016, simply because the culture up there just it wasn't the best fit for us, honestly. Sure. We enjoyed living up there, but we just missed Colorado. Moved back November 2017, studied for the NCE, cried a lot for a month and a half. Passed that on the first time, thank goodness.
For you. That's great.
I know. Yeah. Got my license officially like February 2017, started working at a group practice for about 3.5, 4 years. And then last year, decided I'm ready to go out on my own. I'm ready to kind of be my own boss. And so July 1st, started my private practice and just made a year. And
wow, congratulations. So you give all of us hope. I did say I heard you said you cried. So yeah, I think we've all been there just a little bit. And
lots of panic attacks in grad school, lots of crying. My poor husband.
Absolutely. So, well, I appreciate you doing it. Can you answer another question for me? Can you tell me how do you pronounce your last name?
It's Vendania. So my maiden name is like the most boring, easiest Cajun name, Landry. Okay. So when I married my husband, I knew it was going to be an uphill battle for the rest of my life. So it's Vendania.
Vendania. Okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to practice the name, but I was like, I'm probably going to slaughter it. And I just wanted to make sure that we were able to. Okay. That was a Baldy from one of my children. And let's just go ahead and introduce Micah. Come on, Micah. You're already on the recording now. So say hello.
Hi, friend. Who is that?
That's.
I'm Baldy.
All right. So let's go that way if you can. So yes, go that way. So sorry about that. Love you too, buddy. All right. So we'll have to edit that one. But
I'll be back.
Yes, I told you that was going to occur, and it did. So, but I was going to tell you, for us, this is a journey, and obviously you've been on the journey. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was to find a person who has been on that journey and can help us and give us some perspectives, because honestly, we really don't have a perspective. We're going into this for different reasons and all of that. But so I just have some questions for you today, but thank you for introducing yourself and for being kind to my kid and Baldy, the school teacher is what they call it. So I just want to begin. We're going to talk a little bit about personal reflection. And so I have a few questions around that. So one of the questions is, could you share, reflecting on your personal journey, would you be willing to share what inspired you, first of all, to choose counseling as a career? Because obviously you could have chose anything. So what was it about counseling that really drew you?
It was a lot of different factors. First off, my dad is in family law. He's a divorce attorney, but now he's a family mediator. So I kind of was always exposed to that kind of stuff, just like how to help people in a professional setting. So that was really cool to see him provide help during some of the hardest times. So I grew up with that. And then also growing up, I had a long-term boyfriend and also a childhood best friend who both experienced, I mean, literally every issue you can think of when it comes to mental health. And I was kind of just thrown into it. Like, like these are people I cared about. Like, I don't know, I'll just be a friend to them. Never once knew about the crisis line to use or that I should maybe go to my parents so that these people could get help. Like, didn't know about any of that. So it was just kind of a natural role I took as far as like, I love them. I care for them. This is what I do. My mom also said that I approached her when I was a kid and I told her I like talking to people about their problems. I don't remember that at all. She was like, well, do you give them advice? I'm like, no, I just listen.
Well, and that's good. Yeah.
Active listening. And then also just growing up, South Louisiana definitely has a just kind of ignore it mentality. And that was never me. If someone was struggling, like, let's support them. Like that was always just kind of my natural thing. Yeah. I felt like I was way more in touch with my emotional world than a lot of people around me. And so ultimately my friend in high school, senior year, was like, I think I'm going to major in psychology. And I was like, I think I will too. And that was it.
So it was peer pressure that got you into
Definitely peer pressure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it just made sense. It was like, oh, okay. Humans are fascinating. Like, we're the basis of everything, and the emotional world is so unknown. So let's just dive in.
Wow. That's a great answer. And it's funny because what does make sense, sometimes it's a natural flow towards that. And
yes.
So part of this and a question that we had is, would you be willing to tell us how you found placement for your internship?
Oh yeah.
Gain your hours for licensure.
Yeah. So my program, Fort Hays, kind of had already established relationships within the community. Okay. So we had a counseling center on campus that just took people on for either internship or practicum. And then we actually, for how small Hays is, it's really cool. They have a inpatient hospital that is a trauma-informed care facility for adolescents and kids. And my focus was trauma, and it was just down the road, and they had an already existing relationship. So it was kind of like, all right, Sarah, like, what are you leaning towards? And then also the professor who was in charge of our program, he would always like get emails about like, hey, here are some internships happening, and would just kind of let us be aware of that.
And then you could choose what you wanted to be a part of. Yeah. Did you find, this is just a question, did you find supervision an important part of gaining your life? I mean, I know it's a portion of it and it actually is required, but did you find it beneficial to you?
Oh, that is so hard to, because I actually, I am a huge advocate of supervision. I had a lot of issues with my supervisor in my first job. In my internship, adored my supervisor, still friends with them. I think it's very important to have someone who has been in your position be there along with you in that, because for me, I had so much anxiety. I wanted to do it right. You hear some heavy things that you've never heard before, and you're supposed to help these people. I mean, like, I needed that support. And I think it's a lot of
weight with that, isn't there? Yeah.
Yes, this is the heaviest career you can, well, I don't want to say that. I don't want to dismiss others, but it is a very heavy career.
Absolutely. People are relying on what you say and being directed. So I appreciate you asking. That was just a question I personally had. I didn't mean to throw that in there, but yeah, I guess I did. So I did it. So, so let me ask you this question. What benefits do you see for yourself and maybe other professionals as being a part of these professional organizations like the American Counseling Association? What associations are you a part of?
So I'm going to be honest, I'm part of none.
Oh, well, that's good. I want to know, because we've been taught, oh gosh, you should do that. Tell me a little bit more about that. Help me to understand that.
Okay, so at when I worked at an agency, I was a part of like 8. Like it was kind of just required that we would be a part of it. And it looks good as far as marketing. It makes you look good. Personally. I am not a member simply because I felt like I was part of like a social work organization, and I just kind of felt like I'm not a social worker. Like, I'll be part of ACA, APA, things like that. 2, I was getting flooded with emails that like I wanted to like look at, but like I never had time. And so why I'm not a part of them is simply because I just never felt like I used them. You can get discounts from them. I know that. But like I think of it as this, right? Like you're going to pay $100 a year to be able to put on your profile or on your website that you're part of APA, right? Fine and dandy, but I prefer to say, if I'm going to pay $100, I want to also be saying, and look, I'm also doing this certificate and I'm gaining continuing education and I'm attending the conferences, and I just wasn't utilizing them that way. I do that in other ways.
Sure.
So that's
my good to know, because for us, and you probably were aware of that, when you're going through grad school, there's a box they hand you and to say, okay, here's the things that you need. And so it's good to hear that perspective of, well, gosh, maybe there's some other things we could do, or maybe we don't really even need to be a part of that if we're not really going through or taking advantage of some of those things that are available. So
I would say, so for me, I like AFCC, Association of Family and Conciliation Courts. It's the conferences I went through with my dad.
Okay.
I like it because it's a combination of mental health and legal. It's divorce oriented, but I liked it because I was getting good resources from it. If you get good resources and you get good discounts leading towards things that you're truly interested in, go for it. But if it's not benefiting you and you're just doing it just for the looks, like, I don't know.
Then what's the point? Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you for answering those. I'm going to kind of segue, Sarah, with therapeutic models and client care. And I sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I don't. But I'm going to pretend like I do.
Hey, so imposter syndrome all the way.
That's right. I'm going to put on my mask here and pretend. So would you tell us a little bit about your clientele? In other words, is your clientele more specialized, or do you have just kind of a wide range, or do you specialize in one particular, is it divorce? Is it family? Is it, tell us a little bit about your clientele.
I'm definitely an individual counselor. I tried couples, I've tried family. It's not where my heart is. It's also very complicated. Okay. So I'm definitely an individual counselor. Over the years, I've learned I love working with college-age women who have like self-worth issues, who come from dysfunctional families, who've had traumatic events. I love working with that. Every counselor works with depression and anxiety, whether or not they know it. Sure. It's just everywhere. So that's definitely a big piece. I also really love working with difficult men, and also men who just...
Well, you're working with one right now. So yeah.
And also just men that like weren't taught that it's okay to feel.
Yeah.
And I just love introducing them to that world and letting them know, like, you're not going to lose yourself by accessing your emotional world, so I love working with men. They're also so very motivated. Like once they get into the therapeutic room, they get work done. So
they want to be fixers. Yeah.
Yes. And I teach them to sit with things, and it takes a long time, but it's okay. They do it. And then also, so like my big thing is trauma. I went into the field to work with trauma. So I work from a trauma lens. It is like my biggest thing. Okay. Granted, not everyone who comes into my office has some sort of trauma, but I still like work with a lot of themes of like just feeling lonely, of feeling hopeless, worthless, how to cope with trust being broken, different themes that come up in trauma but are not necessarily related to a traumatic event.
Sure, I understand the kind of the aftermath or the effects from it or so. For sure. And that's widespread for sure. Thank you for sharing that. Would you mind sharing how you collaborate with outside counseling networks? In other words, to put a treatment plan together. For example, in my, I do pastoral counseling. It's by no means what you do, but I have in the past worked with other licensed professional counselors to say, hey, here's Joe or Jack or whoever it would be. Here's the things that I've noticed. Do you work in collaboration with others at all? Okay, can you tell me more about that?
I am a social butterfly and an extrovert to the T. So any opportunity I have to collaborate with another caregiver or provider, I will absolutely do it. And now that I'm in private practice, I actually have way more time to do that, which I really appreciate. I find that the more collaborative the care, the better.
Yeah.
So for example, I have a colleague who is a medication provider in right next door to me, and I've referred clients to her, and I'm able to collab with ROIs, of course, release of information.
Sure.
I'm able to collaborate with her to make sure, you know, like, hey, this client had this question, just to give you a heads up in case that comes up in y'all's next appointment, or like, hey, how are they doing? And I've had med providers kind of update me like, hey, I made these changes, just to kind of keep me in the loop.
Sure.
I've consulted with, let's see, oh yeah, nutritionists in regards to like eating disorder stuff, just to kind of be on the same page. EMDR therapists.
What is DR? What is that?
Oh my gosh, it's eye movement desensitization, and
Oh yeah. Okay.
I
Yeah.
always forget the R. I always forget the R.
That's okay. I just couldn't remember. I know about the eye
Yeah.
movement desensitization.
Yeah.
Desensitization. Boy, that's good. It's hard
Oh
to
yeah.
say. So.
Yeah. EMDR, also neurofeedback. I've consulted with or collaborated with that. I collaborate with sex therapists. Who else? And then also like other therapists. So for example, if I'm seeing the husband and a colleague is seeing the couple with a release, we'll consult and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just find it so much more efficient. You know, like I'm always going to only have what is in front of me, you know, and so other professionals are able to kind of give me insights into things that they're seeing to kind of keep in my back pocket.
Sure.
Also, I really like collaborating to make sure we're all on the same page. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Absolutely.
if the medication provider is addressing anxiety, yet I'm only addressing depression, like we need to get on the same page with that kind of stuff, like what's going on kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's huge. And I appreciate you, you know, that you gave us a different perspective as far as nutritionists too, as well, because that's a part and a piece that I'd never really even considered.
So that's a big one that I've become aware of, because I'm very aware of what I'm not an expert in and when to refer out, or when to utilize other services. And so, for example, I'm not a nutritionist. I cannot educate a client who could be exhibiting some potential disordered eating behaviors or beliefs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer you to a nutritionist so we can get some education in regards to that, to make sure that we're covered and that we have the knowledge and we have the people in place to kind of prevent something from getting worse.
Absolutely. Pardon me for just a moment. I'm going to shut a door here real quick. Okay.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're fine.
So would you tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, about your therapeutic approaches that you employ, and why you feel those are the most effective? And this was one of the questions that I was very interested in, because I kind of lean one way. And so I just wanted to see where you're at and what approach you find really effective. And do you mix them? Do you?
So I only grin because I feel like this has been like the most popular question in our field, but from both clients and academics. And then also, like, I'm always like, I don't know. So I am confident that I am a person-centered counselor. Like, I am confident about that.
Okay.
It is the one modality that I lean most towards, the one that fits me personally the best. Everything else, who knows? My previous mentor told me, like, I do utilize CBT. I couldn't tell you how I utilize CBT though. My psychology 101 professor said, if you identify as an eclectic therapist, you're not a therapist, or something to that degree. And like, I'm probably an eclectic therapist.
That's a strong statement.
So, it was a very strong statement, and I did not agree with it.
Yeah.
I'm always person-centered, but I also would say I probably dabble in others depending on the client. Okay. Not every modality is meant for every client. So for example, person-centered really emphasizes the relationship and really emphasizes the client's ability to grow. Not every client wants that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I kind of have to adjust accordingly, or refer out, because, you know, I kind of know where I work from. Yeah. modalities are just hard because I know they're really popular right now. It's like, we want evidence-based. We want to be able to show insurance companies, show our clients like what we're doing actually works. But at the core of it is the relationship.
Yeah. Do you find that and this is just an offshoot of that question. Do you find, because I'm developing my own personal theory, do you do that as well?
Probably.
Yeah. I was kind of interested in that a little bit, and maybe I could offline sometimes talk to you about that one. But so let me ask you this, just in your experience and with your clientele, I know everyone probably has different, number of sessions they go to, but one of the questions that we had is, what's the average number of sessions that you generally find with your clients?
I'm a long-term therapist, so I've had clients for years.
Wow. Okay.
Oh yeah. It depends on the presenting problem, the presenting issue. Oftentimes, I think the reason I have clients who I have had for years, like in the past, is because their issue has never been addressed.
Right.
Like, this is their first time facing it, and so we have a lot to dive into. And with trauma, I've had some cases where we were building rapport and they were kind of feeling out if they could trust me for like 9 months to a year before they could open up. Yeah. So it obviously depends. If I ever have a client that comes to me and is like, I just want coping skills for stress. Okay, that's what we focus on. But oftentimes it ends up leading to us doing some deeper work.
Sure.
So yeah, it depends. I also have clients who are just kind of comfortable with it being a reoccurring thing, just because life unfolds, and especially with COVID, especially with the political environment, like a lot of stuff has come up for people that hasn't gone away quickly, so.
And especially tension in families between all of these things. It's yeah.
I say this every day, Rodney.
I noticed your body language right there. So it was,
They have not written a book on the stuff we're dealing with this stuff. We're going to have a book in a few years, but we don't have it right now.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for answering that. And I wasn't for sure if there was a number of sessions. I kind of figured that it might be dependent upon the client and the person. And
it's also dependent upon insurance. You'll figure that out when you start practicing. So some insurance providers determine, or EAPs maybe, or that's a whole thing.
That's a whole thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to move to referral and aftercare. And so, when you're seeing a client, and when you find that it maybe is best to refer to the client to another counselor or somewhere else, how do you handle the transition from where you are to another maybe therapist, and then maybe aftercare, all of that? Can you explain a little bit about that?
But luckily, I've never actually had to transition a client out because I'm not the right fit or something like that. Usually I'm pretty, I do an initial consultation, and that usually gives me a good idea of, is this person within my scope or not?
Okay.
And that's actually really nice because I'm able to, as soon as I catch on to it and I know what questions to ask to figure that out, I'm able to say, like, I may not be the best counselor for you, but here are the people I would recommend.
Okay.
But I have, because I've left jobs before, I've had to, that's a heartbreaking transition. Yeah. It's really hard leaving clients. But I do a lot of work to connect with the counselors I would refer them to make sure there's a good handoff. If we can actually do an in-person handoff, that would be beautiful.
Yeah.
Just to kind of help the person's guard go down a little bit. But if not, I do a lot of processing with them around what it's like for me to leave. Do they feel good to kind of go out on their own at this point in time? Or, if they do feel good to not do therapy again, like, hey, what are some signs we should look for to go back to therapy and things like that? Sometimes I'll help them find a therapist. So for example, you'll figure this out too, but licensure and reciprocity for different states is not the best when it comes to our field. So clients who've had to move back to their home state due to COVID, I've had to in treatment and talk to them about, like, okay, what, do you want to look for another therapist? Like, how do we do this? So it's different transitions, just not exactly the type I think that you're asking about, but always having a good idea of what your scope is and knowing when is this a case where I just need continuing education consultation? Is this a case where I need to just have them refer to another professional and still work with me in therapy? Or is this a case where no, they need to see another therapist completely?
I understand. Gosh, that's yeah, I'm sure it's tough for someone that you've been working with, for them to be able to say, okay, it's taken me a long time to build rapport, and now I've got to go do this all again. And yeah, that's difficult.
Yeah.
Just a question as far as, and I know we talked about this prior, but how do the mental health networks play a role in addressing continuity of care? In other words, the collaboration there, inpatient care, outpatient care. What's the process look like from transitioning a person from from you to inpatient care, those type of things? What's that look like?
Well, inpatient care, I mean, that's kind of a different, I don't know, that's usually a crisis related situation. Okay. I find the transition to inpatient care is much smoother when you have a good relationship with the client.
Okay.
When they know that when I tell them your safety is the most important thing to me, that when I say we need a crisis evaluation or we need to look into inpatient, they know it's coming from a place of love and it's coming from a genuine place versus I'm anxious. I need you to go to inpatient just because I'm worried you won't be safe. Like they need to know it's coming from a authentic place. Right. Typically when clients have gone inpatient, it's or a residential or like a treatment facility or rehab. It depends on the treatment facility. Some won't reach out to me to collaborate with me. And in that regard, I just simply say, okay, this client is where they need to be right now. I'm going to take a step back and they're going to receive the treatment they need to receive at the place. Some will contact me just to kind of get like some insight, like what have y'all been working on? What have you been seeing? That kind of stuff. But that's usually just like a one-time thing. I'm trying to think of other situations.
Once they're out from outpatient or inpatient care and they transition back out, maybe back into your care, are you able to access the notes from where they were or do they share those? Or
sometimes I've had some inpatient places send me a fax of the records. Some don't. Oh no, yeah, I've had clients go to like ERC, for example, the Eating Recovery Center, and I've had them send me. Yeah, so I think actually a lot of them will send me the stuff, and I'll look it over. And again, that's kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. Okay.
Yeah. So it may be exposed or a little more than what you were able to find.
Yeah.
So would you share more about your personal approach to aftercare? What does that look like for you?
So like if a client comes back from inpatient, for example, I really like to talk about what did they learn? What did they feel was most beneficial? Unfortunately, sometimes I kind of have to process how it was not beneficial.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's a hard one. Or what they learned. There's always different dynamics that unfold whenever people go to IOP, they go to PHP, or wherever there's just other people involved. There's different dynamics that unfold, and it's just interesting for them to just kind of give you a summary of what they were exposed to, and also just kind of what they learned about themselves. Like, yeah, we did this one group and they were right. Like, I need to be doing this more. And I just wasn't. It's like, okay, why do you think you weren't? It's like, yeah, it's kind of a cool change in scenery. If it's a safety thing, it's nice that they were able to obtain safety, and the med eval and that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's just kind of a cool, like, to see what they get out of it, hoping they get something out of it.
So when a person leaves your care, do you ever follow up with them? Do you ever contact, or do they just transition out?
I let them know I'm always here when you need.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And I don't forget them. I tell every client, I will not forget you. Yeah. I still think about clients from when I was in Massachusetts.
Wow. That's great. That's great. Yeah. Let me ask you some ethical questions. Yeah. Because you don't deal with those, I'm sure. I mean, there's none of that. Yeah. But hopefully these won't be too difficult to process through. But in your experience, do you see and one of the questions we had, and I'm gonna look this up because it was difficult for me to, and I'm gonna try to say this, paradoxical directive. Have you ever heard of that? Basically to say, and I read that in my coursework, and it's basically that says the therapist it's almost what we call reverse psychology. That they say, you tell them one thing to try, but they rebel against it, which makes them do exactly what you want them to do, to realize, well, that was, yeah. Do you ever, is that ethical? Is that right? I mean, how do you feel?
So much work. I can't even like think about that.
Yeah.
I don't know the ethics around that.
Yeah.
I know that wouldn't fit me because I'm a very direct therapist.
Okay.
And also, like, I listen to a podcast. This is the best podcast. It's Light Up the Couch by Clearly Clinical. And they did a podcast called The Violence of Advice.
Light Up the Couch.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an incredible podcast. But they talked about the violence of advice. Like, I'm not going to, like, the violence of advice, like, basically, one, advice does not work. That's why people come to therapists, because their friends just give them advice and it doesn't work. And two, advice creates the power dynamic between a therapist and a counselor, making like us the experts, and thus like the client feels like we have the answers, but that's not the case. The answers are within the client, and we're supposed to help them discover that. So like this paradoxical thing, one, too complicated for me to wrap my brain around, and two, like, I don't know, like the client knows more and has the tools to resolve their presenting issues, and we need to trust that within them.
No, I appreciate you saying that. When I read that, I thought, well, gosh, that seems pretty difficult to try to get them to, to do that.
I will say, when clients are like, tell me what to do, I'll straight up say no. Like, I'm not doing that.
No, I agree with that. So let me ask you, do you see that different models of psychology, though, attract different areas of ethical concern?
Man, that was a good question. Again, because I'm not an expert on all the different modalities, I'm sure there's some ethical thing to be aware of in each of them. I would say with person-centered, because you are so focused on the relationship, you obviously have to have good boundaries. These are not your friends. These are not your loved ones. These are your clients. You can care about them and you can love them from a distance, but they are still your clients. So there's definitely that. And then the only thing I could think of was there's so many like evidence-based trauma interventions. So like prolonged exposure, EMDR, all that kind of stuff. The only thing that I can think of is like one of the huge ethical things is do no harm. And when it comes to trauma, there's definitely a high risk of a client being re-traumatized. And so that's definitely something to keep in mind. In my opinion, that would definitely be something to keep in mind to make sure that you are competent in the modality. And then also you can pick up on when it's too much for the client, and
there's
that you're
like a pressure point there or something.
Yeah. And counseling is not supposed to be easy, but it's also not supposed to be re-traumatizing.
Wow, that's a good point. I think sometimes maybe in an effort to try to help, I've experienced that in the past of like, even as a pastor, oh, here's something and they don't want that. They just want to be heard. And sometimes it raises issues that really hurt them. And so, yeah, no, that's a very good point. So let me ask you this. This might be one that, and again, obviously we know confidentiality and all of those type of things, but if possible, the question was, please tell us the most difficult ethical dilemma you've encountered, and how the situation was handled, and any advice that you could have for us as far as handling ethical situations. And again, that may be broad, but I don't know if there's one that you can kind of share.
I will say that I've been practicing for almost 7 years, and my cross to bear in this field is mandated reporting.
I am right there with you. Because I'm a mandatory reporter, and I get it.
It is, it's one of the exceptions to confidentiality. Like that's like the basics of our field, right? Like if they're going to harm themselves, harm someone else, a child, elderly, or intellectually disabled person being harmed, right? It seems so black and white, but it is not. Like it is the grayest area ever. And I have a lot of anxiety around it. It is something that I am in therapy coping with. It is something I am always trying to address. So I take it very seriously by one, seeking my own treatment to make sure that I am addressing my own stuff that's coming up, and also just making sure that, like, I don't know, that I'm doing my best to make sure that I'm a good mandated reporter. And two, continuing education, that I will deep dive on stuff on how to figure out what to do in a scenario. And then consulting with trusted individuals. And I'll probably touch on that a little bit later, but making sure you have people in your back pocket to consult with and then also talk to, because this is not an easy role to have. And so that's always been my thing, because mandated reporting is always going to be part of our role. You know what I mean? Like when you sign on to be a therapist, you sign on to be a mandated reporter. But it is, for some reason, it has always been something that I just get so much anxiety about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it impacts lives beyond the office, for sure. Well, thank you for sharing that. Here's one that was asked, and in our coursework, we've learned that many counselors feel that bartering for counseling services is unethical. First of all, have you had anyone ever do that? And, what's your opinion on that as from a professional standpoint?
Yeah, I've never had anyone do that.
Like, here's some fish. I'll bring you fish for counseling services. I've seen that in Alaska, those type of things. So I don't know what that, yeah.
No, I've never had that. I don't know if I just don't come off as that type of person, or I don't know, or just I have really, like we are professionals, like I take my role seriously, like as far as like fee for services kind of thing. I'm a professional, just like an accountant, just like like a lawyer, No, I've never had that. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Is it, do you feel it's ethical to allow bartering?
I know there is something within the ethics code around that. It's not something I've ever paid attention to, since I've never had it come up. If it does come up, though, it is something that I would refer to the ACA ethics code. So I don't know if I have an opinion on it. I know I would not do it.
Okay.
I don't think I'd feel comfortable with it.
Okay. Something that you mentioned just a moment ago, and I'm just going to come back to it, is why do you feel that it's important? And this was something that wasn't asked, but I'm going to ask it. Why do you feel that it's important for counselors to be in counseling, to to allow themselves to go through therapy? What's some of the reasons for that?
One of my favorite professors in grad school, she said, don't ever recommend anything to a client that you're not willing to try. And I always kept that in mind, because I remember being like, Gina, I hate deep breathing. I'm not doing it, but I'll try it. And then the other thing that I gathered from I attended like a presentation recently where they talked about, it was in regards to death and just like coping with death and things like that. And they say your client will only go as deep as you will go. Yeah,
that's a great point.
Yeah. And another thing is, in order to truly understand what it's like for someone to come into counseling for the first time, you need to be in the other side of the chair as well. Yeah. You need to know what it's like to have that anxiety, to have that, okay, should I tell them this during this session? Can I trust this person? Like, what are they going to think when I tell them this? Like, is this even something I should address? Like, you need to be able to understand what it's like to be in that chair.
Yeah, no, that's great. I heard somebody say one time, you can't take someone further than you've, not further than where you've been. And so that's great. And so I'm going to move into a little bit of history and future. And it's not any major, historical depth, but I do have the field of counseling, from what we've learned, I know the field of psychology has been around for a long time, but counseling itself is, I would say, not fairly new, but it's new to a certain extent. So what historical founder in the field of counseling do you feel that you most admire or adhere to?
Oh my God, there's so many. So I personally love Freud because
Okay.
he did some stuff, didn't he?
Yeah.
And it wasn't all bad. That's what Freud has a reputation that, we would not have defense mechanisms if we didn't have Freud. So let's just not fully dismiss Freud. I love Carl Rogers just because he's person-centered and, he was a farmer. Isn't that interesting?
I read about him. Yeah.
Man, I thought that was so cool. And when I going to school in Kansas with my supervisor was also a farmer, and I was just like, wow, that's interesting. So I love Rogers. I love Bowlby.
Okay.
I'm a big attachment theory person.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely love attachment theory. So I love Bowlby. I love a lot of the trauma people. So like Peter Levine. Oh my gosh, who wrote Trauma and Recovery? Whoever wrote that, she was an incredible Judith, whatever her name is.
I would help you, but I'm still learning. So I'm like,
no, you're good. Yeah, I think those are kind of look, Bessel van der Kolk is like the huge name in trauma stuff. Like he's huge. He's in all the trainings, but I heard some not great things about him.
okay.
So I'm kind of on, it wasn't confirmed, so I'm kind of hesitant to say him, but
on the fence. Yeah.
Oh, Lori Gottlieb.
Okay.
So she's not historical. She's a current author, but I love her. Oh, and then also Yalom. Yalom.
Okay.
I like him.
Okay. No, that's great. You gave me some names I hadn't heard before. So Bowlby, I didn't know that.
Oh my gosh, attachment theory. Oh, Bowlby's the best.
Okay. I'll have to look, I may have read that, but gosh, when you're going through this, there's so much reading. It's,
Well, I did my thesis on trauma and attachment theory. So I was like knee deep in Bowlby material for years. So,
well, that gives us something to think through and look at. So here's a question, as you, from your perspective, as you look to the horizon of the field of counseling, do you see any new therapeutic approaches that you're interested in and that's coming? And you're like, gosh, that's something I've never considered, or any techniques that you find that you're going, I want to further investigate that?
I will say, okay, one thing I've learned is like something that's new in the field has actually been around for like 30 years. I've noticed that. It's so interesting. So I'm really interested in internal family systems simply because like I find it's a kind of it's IFS. It's a good trauma theory to work from, just because trauma is oftentimes family associated. I'm really interested to see if modalities like EMDR and neurofeedback continue to be as popular as they are.
Okay. This is the eye movement and those type of things, right? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Because it's so sciencey.
Yeah.
It's so different than what I do as far as like the relationship and the connection with clients, and it's so different, and it's effective. The research shows it, but I'm really interested to see if it sticks around for a while.
Yeah, it is an interesting therapy. And again, I don't know much about it, but some of it, what I've read, seems pretty interesting to me. And well, I have one last question for you. Okay. And this is probably the biggest one, is what advice could you give us as future LPCs that you wish someone would have given you? Looking back, if you could go back and turn the hands of time back and say, gosh, I wish somebody would have told me this. Help us.
I have a lot, honestly. I find myself saying oftentimes, like, they didn't teach you this in grad school, did they?
Yeah.
So one of the first things I actually had was, I remember in my ethics class, they would say this, and this, like, do this. And if you are so confused, seek supervision, right? But I remember being my first job, I had a really challenging supervision situation, and I had no one to talk to about it. And I did not know how to work around it. And because it was never really addressed, right? Like, they talked about, like, go to your supervisor, but what if the supervisor is the problem? So my guidance to new counselors is stay connected with your cohort and our people within your, like your instructors. Because in my first job, I didn't have like friendships with therapists. Like now I have a great collection of people that I've known over the years that I can talk to. But stay connected to your people in your school, because sometimes they will be the only ones that you can connect with to help you through a situation.
Okay.
The other thing is go to therapy.
Yeah.
Like, and to your self-care. Like burnout is real. And when you start to feel burnt out, you need to attend to it, because as soon as you start to feel that, your clients could potentially begin to be affected by that. And that you don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if your only purpose for being a counselor is the money, you need to reevaluate yourself and your values. I'm not saying you can't make a good living off of being a counselor. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying when you begin to see your clients as numbers or a paycheck, you really need to check yourself. Also, really make sure that the people that you have to consult with are trusted individuals. I've recently learned that not everyone in the field is in the field for the right reason. That really led to a lot, that was a really hard realization for me. And it really hurt when you finally saw certain people's true colors. So make sure that the people that you consult with are trustworthy, and also have a good group of people. Like you need to have close friends who are therapists who get this, but you need to also have friends who don't know what it's like to be a therapist, because we hear such dark stuff sometimes. Sometimes I just need to call my best friend who's a stay-at-home mom, and her biggest issue is that her 3-year-old isn't eating like nutritious, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I need to watch my Hallmark Channel movies just to remind me that the world is still a good place, you know? Yeah. And then just self-care, have a good self-care routine, have a good sleep routine, like all the things we talk to clients about, you need to have to.
Well, Sarah, I really, from myself, but also from our team, we really appreciate you taking the time to do this. We know you didn't have to do it, but thank you for being so responsive and for helping, because, you know, we're a lot of us, some of us are older adults like myself. They're just going down this road. Some of us are not, but we're still heading in the same direction, and we still need we need someone that has the light there saying, hey, walk this way, and here's what you need to know. And so I really appreciate you taking the time. And I'm glad you found out I was real.
Yay!
Not a weirdo and all of that. So, but thank you again for taking the time. And once the presentation is done, this is for our final presentation. I'll send it to you and you can watch it and all of that. So
when do you finish?
We finish in, well, our final presentation is in, let's see, this is week 4, 3 more weeks from now. So we'll have that final presentation. And that's not a finishing of the master's, but that's a finishing of this course.
When do you finish your master's?
Oh, gosh. For me, it's going to be about another 1.5 years. So, yeah. So,
and also another piece that I would definitely add in there is that our clients, I don't know, they don't want someone with worksheets. They don't want someone that's going to just like, I don't know.
No, I get you.
Yeah. Like, and the fact that like we all have life experiences, you know what I mean? And if we all have good people skills and ability to connect with people in genuine, authentic ways, which you have as a pastor, like when that imposter syndrome kicks in, because we all know it does, like, just remember that, like, people want us as humans. They don't want the degree. They want
real.
Yes. Yeah.
No, that's probably the best advice you could have given us, you know, because again, we want to, even with our courses, we want to put our best foot forward and this and that. And I mean, you do the best that you can, but you know, we're real. I mean, we're absolutely human. And so
I tell every client I'm on the journey just like they are.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've gotten thrown off on different exits, unfortunately, different times, you know.
We all do. We all do. And that's what enables us to be good counselors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you, and I'll probably set an appointment up for you to work a few things with me. So that'd be a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Because I want to be a good counselor as well.
Oh yeah.
I even told, as far as this is not a part of the video, but I even told people, you know, to be a good leader, you got to learn to follow. And so for me, even there's some things I need to personally work through to be able to be a better counselor. Because I'm an ENTJ, which makes me.
Oh yeah.
I'm sometimes I say more than I should, and I don't listen as well as I should. So my active listening is not as great. My wife tells me.
I had to make notes for today, so I didn't say too much.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I do. So,
yeah.
Well, thank you once again. And I appreciate it. And God bless you on all you do. And we are really thankful. Okay. So I'll send this to you. Okay. Thanks so much.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.